Well, hello and welcome everyone to GOCA's UCCS Galleries of Contemporary Arts virtual studio visit series. I'm excited to have Patrick Marold joining us today over Zoom. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to do this.
Yeah, I launched this series, as I was sharing earlier, back in March of 2020, pretty quickly after we shut things down, as a way to stay connected with artists. And as part of my practice, the studio visit is very important and has a prominent place in how, especially in contemporary art, trying to keep up with everything that's going on is really challenging, or can be. So I think in the year 2018, I logged over 200 studio visits that year, a lot of them with my partner, who's also an artist and curator, and we really enjoy doing that. And so something that I was very worried about, but also a way that we have some funds at GOCA that we can bring to artists. And so we brought a small stipend and brought a platform to connect with artists. You've been keeping pretty busy through this time. I know that because we worked together recently on a monumental project, the Windmill Project, and also recently opened a show at William Havlu Gallery in Denver. And like you shared, you're working on some public projects that some have been multi-year. But I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your background for our audience, which is our students and faculty, and also our community and many artists who will be tuning in. We'll share this recorded later. Share a little bit about who you are and how did you come to become an artist, and where are you now?
So yeah, I grew up in Colorado. I went to Wheat Ridge High School, kind of grew up along the Front Range. I've lived in Denver most of my life, but early on, I was really encouraged as a young man to develop my artistic interests and skills and talents. And that encouragement early on, I think, is one of the biggest components in why I do what I do now. Whether it's false confidence sometimes early on, whatever it is, you know, there's so many reasons not to be an artist, especially when you enter adulthood and the realities of financial, security, or just kind of the reality of life. And I had been encouraged for so long that I had this base of, I had faith in myself that, and if these other people did, here goes Jade. And that's, I think that's important for anyone, whether you're an artist or whatever you do, musician, accountant, anything. If you're reinforced to follow what you're interested in, and you build those talents and skills early on. So I was fortunate enough to then get into Rhode Island School of Design after high school, which was huge and transformative for me to be put into the realm of all these other students of art, other, really great, surrounded by amazing artists coming from Wheat Ridge, Colorado. It was highly motivating. And I just worked my tail off at RISD, one, because it's really expensive, even back then. I mean, it's out of control expensive now. But I felt this responsibility that I had this opportunity to really get after it and go after it and see what this could turn into. And that's where I kind of turned into more of a three-dimensional artist and a sculptor. Like a lot of young people, I grew up with the standard art classes of painting and drawing and photography. And I was limited until I got there and realized this whole world. And also, like I said, I had this family that we would go to art openings as kids. We'd go to museums. We'd visit artist studios, and kind of like what you're doing. My father knew a lot of the, I don't know what generation they were, but there were a bunch of North Denver artists, including John DeAndrea, different people he went to high school with. That I think, one, he was worried that if you're going to do this, I want you to see what it's like, how these people work and live, and also I want you to see what's possible. So as a young man, I'd get to visit these artist studios in downtown, and it was it was really exciting and kind of romantic, and it fed into, you know, all these different components fed into who I am now. While I was at RISD, I did study industrial design, which also, I think we talked about that regarding the windmill project. That had a lot to do with how I go about some of these big projects, knowing how it's going to come together. How are you going to make that concept reality? And that gets exciting for me. So a lot of my projects incorporate that background in industrial design. And then, yeah, after that, you know, I was fortunate to have a few apprenticeships or assistantships, and with some really great artists that also, you know, continued to reinforce where I was going with my own interests. And it was hard, but eventually it started working. I mean, like a lot of young artists, I lived pretty slim. I lived in a garage. I made it work, and I worked lots of different jobs that have nothing to do with what I do now. But I see the way they feed into what I do in terms of these big projects, even having worked in restaurants. A lot of us, you know, wait tables, but no restaurant is going to work on one person. Yeah, you know, the chef is not the only person involved with that experience for the client. And I kind of draw on that sometimes with these bigger projects that require teams of people all coming together, doing different tasks to make an experience. It's not the same as going out to dinner, but you know, all those skills fed into it, and I think continue to reinforce this confidence that maybe isn't always justified, but that I can pull this off, kind of thing. So now I live up above Boulder, kind of between Boulder and Nederland, where I have a studio and my home, and we just have some property. It's somewhat rural, but some days it's not that bad. I mean, it doesn't feel that rural, although we have, you know, we look at the forest. We don't look at neighbors or downtown anymore. Whereas I've been in Denver for 20 years.
You had a studio was it in the Wheat Ridge area? A large studio down there for a while?
I did have a studio in Wheat Ridge briefly. I was mostly on Cherokee Street, kind of in the Globeville area for about 15, 20 years. And, you know, like a lot of artists, we all kind of felt the pressure with rent and whatever. And there aren't too many of us left in Denver anymore out of practicality. But that was really good for a long time in terms of having a community that we developed, and we would work with each other. And yeah, it was good.
I'm just thinking, hearing you share all that, it's really quite special. It's always special. I find every artist that I talk with, like I shared earlier, has a different path and a route. And I was reading something about your parents taking you on walks around Wheat Ridge, nature, and how you felt like that was your starting point as an artist. And with your projects, so many of them crossing over into, you know, land art. And you mentioned some of your internships. I know Andy Goldsworthy was quite influential on your work and practice, but all of it, I hear all of that. You know, the restaurant job, I can relate to that. There's this feeling our students often talk about, and they talked about it when they accomplished the windmill project with you. This feeling that it's sort of impossible. I remember working in a restaurant and being so intimidated. And then by the end of the night, you're sort of euphoric. You somehow manage the rush. And I remember, you know, something would come out, you know, a hailstorm would come up and everybody on the patio dining in the summer would have to be.
Right, you have to respond.
Yeah. And everybody improvised and pulled together, and everybody felt like they were an important part of the team, like you said, even though the chef maybe was the true artist of the space, but the artist really couldn't realize their goals or, you know, vision, or maybe the restaurant owner was the artist. But at any rate, there's an art form involved there for sure. I appreciate hearing all of those experiences woven together.
I think those feelings that, like with the windmill project, the team gets, it is almost a rush, you know, a buzz that you get when it's done. But I seek that. Some of these big projects, when my cat. When I'm proposing some of these ideas, some of the engineers or other artists I'll be talking to these proposals with are like, how are we going to do this? I'm like, I know, it's great. We have no idea.
Some people don't find that exhilarating.
No, some people lose sleep, and I do lose sleep, but
Sure.
I'm constantly trying. I love the discomfort of not knowing how this is all going to come together.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Exquisite discomfort.
Yeah, it is. Exquisite discomfort. That's the title of a book if I ever write.
Yeah, because it's problem solving on a scale that's so collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
To realize a big vision. And speaking of which, your project Shadow Array at the Denver airport was massive. I was reading it was the size of a building, the footprint of a building. These.
Oh yeah, I mean it's 7 acres. In fact, I could start sharing some of those images now.
Yeah,
I was
great.
Go through that process a little bit, but
were you in your current studio when you worked on that, or were you?
No, I was in Denver at the time. Although you'll see in these images. So this is the Shadow Array. It is 7 acres. Almost, it's like 230, 240 logs, and yeah, it was huge. When they introduced me to the opportunity and I'd been chosen, this is the site they showed me.
Wow.
And this is kind of that where I get that adrenaline and that, like, whereas other people like, how do you even, I don't know. We'll figure something out. It's amazing. Like, and if we fail, it'll be epic.
Exactly.
But yeah, I approach the site this way, like with a lot of my projects, and how I control that, whether it's worry or fear, is just sketching early on. A lot of really direct responses on paper, because it's so efficient for me to just start recording these initial thoughts, and these ideas come out of these drawings, whether they're charcoal or pencil. The idea of projecting shadows onto this kind of bowl or valley shaped landform, and they develop. But I also draw on previous projects, and even though it's not that visually related to the Shadow Array, I did this sculptural fence in the city park there. It borders the Denver Zoo. But there was this moment as the season started to pass through that I noticed these great characteristics happening with shadows. And I knew at some point I'd want to kind of work with what was going on in this piece and actually make that the focus of what I'm doing with another sculpture. So these horizontal bands of shadow really informed a lot of where I went with the Shadow Array at DIA. And, this is at the point where I'm starting to take it into the computer with a few people that help me, one, to get a better idea. It's pretty hard for you to envision 7 acres, especially in a studio setting. So to take it into a 3D model is enormously helpful to then navigate and see what the sun does throughout the year and day with the shadows. And then there was the material component of that too, because of course these questions keep coming up, but what are we going to make that? How do you make that happen? And I'm always looking for ways to reuse materials. And of course we have the beetle kill epidemic in our forests in Colorado. So I'd worked with beetle kill before a little bit, but this is always kind of playing in my mind. I love working with trees and wood. And we start exploring, materials, and really these logs in complete form, not cut up into lumber, but left alone, were kind of superior in terms of material characteristics, that as far as deflection and efficiency, as far as weight, and all these different issues that, steel was going to be a real problem with how heavy it was going to become, and all that. I didn't want to use a polymer. So the beetle kill trees were great. one of the guys I've worked with a lot through the years, Matthias, and I went and visited this forest where this family operation down in Del Norte, they just log the Rio Grande National Forest for the beetle kill and have a lumber mill, and they let us go up in the forest and see what they'd be bringing us. And then, you know, as far as the studio space, this is where we really were.
That's the studio space for this project.
Yeah.
How tall are those logs?
Some would arrive over 100 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, they were huge. Somewhere, you know, a lot of these were 200 to 250 years old, which is rare in Colorado. Yeah, they were really, really big trees. And we rented this space. You can see DIA on the horizon out there. You can see the peaks of the terminal. And I wanted something near there, but we also just needed all this room to lay these pieces out. And that Quonset hut was perfect for peeling and processing all these logs, and just creating a space where we could visualize and actually organize. That's one of the biggest problems with studio spaces, is just having the room to step back or digest the vision. It's tough, especially if it's going somewhere that's as big as this site was.
Yeah.
And then this is another way of organizing.
That's a work of art in itself.
I know. This is the spreadsheet from the shadow, right? Of just every log, every characteristic, every measurement, everything we needed was all right there. And I can't take credit for this. This is Matthias and a couple other people that really helped to organize this project. But I love seeing that represents what that sculpture became. And, you know, some people really geek out and love that stuff. And then it would help us, you know, in terms of processing. And, you know, the model I made for this piece was made out of almost chopsticks, about that size. Each log was a chopstick. So it was almost like taking these logs and figuring out, well, how do we handle them like chopsticks? You know, how am I going to cut that to length, and making it all manageable, so we don't get overwhelmed. And step by step, it's actually pretty manageable. It's not that big of a deal. This is installing, and you know, with all of these big projects, I try to leave room for responding to different things along the way. This is us just re-drilling holes on site to make sure this all fits together, giving ourselves the time. And, you know, there was this enormous crane, but it allowed us to handle these, once again, almost like chopsticks, where we're just, take it down, let's lay it on the ground, let's figure it out and get it right. And then, of course, that gives you a better idea of the 7 acres. You have the new hotel on the right there, and then just this huge expanse where the train comes in. And yeah, at the end of that project, there was that rush of, like, if you got slammed at the restaurant and everyone, you know, gets together at the end of the night and has a drink, and, you know, we pulled that off. It was a pretty big team, mostly Denver artists. You know, one was actually a retired lawyer. A lot of different people came in, engineers. They were excited about one component of the piece and ended up, you know, peeling with us as well, or helping with install, or preparing the hillside. And the community that it brings together a project like this that's highly rewarding for me. This is it at night. There was a lighting component that DIA decided to invest the budget in as well, realizing that, you know, airports are really illuminated. They're very bright, and a little system wasn't going to do anything, you know, in comparison. And with this photograph, we balanced out a lot of the levels there, so you can see it better. But that was another whole component of this, that, you know, how are we going to do that? And, you know, we went through 2 consultants that until me and Matthias decided we'll just figure it out ourselves.
Wow. So I was going to ask if you took over the lighting design. I know light is such an important part. You know, you talked about all these materials, and as you were talking, I was thinking about, you have this very intuitive way of sort of breaking down, understanding the material, and maybe taking it out of the realm of what some people might consider very daunting, you know, to say, okay, well, the model is chopsticks, so how do you handle chopsticks? And but light,
That's really oversimplifying it, but
yeah, no, I think that's really great to hear, you know, for anybody taking on a large project is, okay, why don't you get organized, break it into small chunks and take it step by step, and you can accomplish this huge, you know, monumental scale, but also not just the physical scale of the work itself, but, you know, like you said, the team and the site, the timeline, and the airports, I'm sure, have all kinds of considerations for how you work there, and that you had a train running through it. I'm sure there were so many levels of meetings.
The levels and layers with an airport are really pretty complex compared to most sites. But this also took 2.5 years, and you know, a lot of stuff happens with the team. People have kids, people move away, people do get burned out and leave, you know, or never show up again. But yeah, you just respond to it each time. And of course, sometimes there's certain challenges that are upsetting, but you roll with it. This is just kind of a video of that.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Evening lighting, which, yeah, so I ended up deciding that myself and Matthias, who was so involved with this project, could just figure it out ourselves, because there was a specific set of qualities I wanted to get with the light. One, I didn't want the source of the light to be that visible, but I wanted it to be able to, you'll see here, it actually kind of creates a sense of movement. Of course, this is a time-lapse video, but another part of this site was, as they were excavating it, it was clear that this was an old seabed. You know, there were shells and different parts in the soil. So I wanted this kind of tidal movement over a slow period. It kind of rewards the viewer that actually watches, or maybe in the hotel room or eating dinner there. A little surprised that maybe they would notice this transition and this change throughout the evening.
Did you spy the people that just ran through it?
Yeah, that was actually, that might have been me. I took that video the night we were kind of just adjusting the lights and aiming them and stuff. But yeah, that's that project. I mean, we kind of went down a different tangent that way with the initial idea of what studio space I used there. But I can talk about this image. It just happened to come up after that, you know. But this is a huge drawing that came out of that project, in the way of like trying to return to the studio work and bringing it back to maybe these core expressions or gestures. And I took a lot of these logs left over from the project and charred them to use them the way I would a charcoal stick. But once again, you know, the chopstick or charcoal stick, we're handling these and drawing with a forklift. And, you know, I'm kind of wrestling them around and trying to create drawings on a scale that reflect what I'd just gone through with the shadow array. And I was fortunate enough to, you know, Tina Goodwin at the time was representing me, and she allowed me to exhibit these drawings that year.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see your process. I was going to ask you about the city park fence at the zoo, because I saw so many similarities in the form. I didn't really think about the light. I was looking at that sort of arced bend in the middle, and it reminded me a lot as well of the first project I worked on with you, which was a string installation indoor.
Yeah, which I have that image.
You can see that. I can almost see the you know, there it is. Yeah, the lines of string and that arc that you were interested in exploring in the space with the parabola. It was such a simple process in a lot of ways, but like, again, it took a team of us to pull it off over more days than I thought it would be. But
well, yeah, more than I thought too. All of the fingertips were so sore because all of those were pinned in place. But yeah, once again, you know, there was that team environment that I feed off and I enjoy.
but I remember, the material of the string, the way it fell was important, but the lighting was so important. And so thinking of that fence at the zoo in Denver and shadow array, of course, it's really, really interesting to hear about your consideration of the lighting in the day. Obviously, you modeled the sun and the shadows, and that the patterns were of interest to you. And so light is really for you, I think, a material as much as the wood and
Oh
metal
yeah,
string.
yeah, I would agree. It's almost inherent, or in what I'm doing. I don't necessarily go out and think how is this going to work with the light. It's just a constant consideration. It's part of my language that I think a lot of these pieces show that similarity, because I'm constantly considering that.
Do you think you first were considering that, when you were in undergrad at RISD? Was that sort of something that was brought up to consider, or was it something you developed from growing up in a place where there's so much sunlight and
Yeah, I think it's more about that. I
time?
think, in college, I wasn't really thinking on these terms yet. I also wasn't thinking on this scale. One of the first ones, this one was in Reykjavik, where I got to make one of those in the Reykjavik Art Museum in their courtyard.
Was this was later than your Fulbright that you did in Iceland?
This was the Fulbright, yeah.
Oh, it was, okay.
It was that Fulbright year, and it was funny. It just kind of came out of a couple conversations, and the director of the museum, I forget how he got pulled into the conversation, but it's like, well, we have this courtyard. But why don't you just do it in there? And so I did, over, I think, a really rainy week. And once again, a friend came from New York with his wife. They happened to be planning to visit anyway, but the museum decided to try to extend their stay. And there was this team again, where the three of us kind of just built this over the course of a week. And I think one of us got sick, and, there's all these things, but to finish it and then release it and let it be there. It was fantastic. I would kind of do a lot of these. This was shortly after college, after I graduated, in a silo without its roof on the island of Nantucket. And this is where I really started probably noticing the potential of material and light and scale. I'd always wanted to work on this scale, but of course there's so many obstacles you come up against, with whether it's just material or cost or feasibility. How are you going to pull that off, especially at this point where it was me and a ladder and a spool of nylon string that was in the corner of the school. But then, to finish it and release it and see how the kids that would come to the school and stuff would react to it, and watch it breathe, because the architecture of the silo was almost like a body, and this was the lungs, so it was breathing with that architecture. And then of course the sun was following this pathway. So as exciting as it was to make this, it was also hugely informative about, one, the impact it has on the viewer and the potential of going to that scale efficiently and not getting hung up with, how's it going to stay up? Or I tied knots at the top of the silo, and it wasn't intended to be a permanent piece. And it kind of went away midway through my time there and tangled up. But yeah, that's where those string pieces kind of started coming out. And I feel like they were a strong exercise for me for a long time in exploring how to respond to particular spaces and light that way.
And do you feel like all of your projects in a way are an exercise or a study, or you're studying? Because even thinking about, the project we worked on together most recently, the windmill project, you were finding the site and but you don't really know what it's going to look like until you get that chance. And it made me think about how sculptors in particular need space to play and to install and to explore, experiment.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like all of these, even my commissions, are still explorations for me. There's certainly far more finished, and they're intended to be far more permanent than I would otherwise. But that's what makes it interesting to me to continue to make them, is that I learned so much. And yeah, the windmill project, even though I've done it, for 20 years now, there was so much that came out of the Austin Bluffs site and that installation, and even just the way it went together this time in comparison to previous projects. It's clear that I have learned through the years, and then to see what you guys brought to it, and the coordination and the consideration of the site and the people that would see it, and why these paths. I mean, it's just such an accessible site with so many great views that I'm really pleased with how it came out. And I learned a ton from doing it again with you guys.
Oh, that's great to hear. But yeah, I hear you using a language that's sort of, a lot of scientific sort of experimentation, exploration,
Yeah,
understanding, developing systems for these projects. Obviously, you have to with the scale. But then you said sort of breaking it down and understanding everything from the way materials work to the site itself, and then also thinking about the site. This is all, like you said with the shadow array, that was an old seabed, and that would inform, but it's so subtle that it's not on a heavy-handed scale. You're not rendering. It doesn't look like an ocean wave, washing over. But when you mentioned that, I've often thought the spline of it looked very fossil-like, anyways.
Yeah, I started hearing that after it was complete. A lot of people compared it to a whale.
Oh yeah, and I thought when you did the string installation at GOCA, I always thought that looked like the belly of the whale in the classic tale of Jonah and the belly of the whale.
Yeah, and the one I did in Iceland, when I translated a newspaper, review of it, they compared it to a whale as well. I had no idea what they were writing about, but yeah, maybe there's something about whales and, and what I'm doing. But
yeah, well, and maybe they're the only things that we can understand at those scales, those larger scales.
Right. Yeah,
right?
true.
The rib cage of even an elephant, it would be pretty big, but and sad to see, of course. But the whale is on the level of, like, the mythical dinosaur fossil.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's inspired books like Moby Dick.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, for most of us, that's a world that seems so mysterious, and that an animal could be at that scale is endlessly fascinating. And your work does that trick. Even looking at those children in that silo, they clearly had this look of awe on their face, and there's something about that scale. When you're small, it's like you're back to being a child and just having this sense of wonder. And I think that's what I've loved about being in the middle of the windmill project at that scale of 2,000 poles on that landscape.
Yeah, to be totally surrounded by these, and then in the evening with the light, and yeah, it becomes a living body, which is the way I describe it a lot. And I think scale for me, I'm careful not to get too enamored with scale, because I don't want it to be a formula, but there's a reason why I've always been so attracted to, even in the natural world, like canyonlands or some of these landforms that reach a scale that starts to put you at awe, or put you in a place mentally. It's something I go after, and it motivates me. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting, even as you're talking about that. I was talking earlier today with some folks who are huge fans of this project, and about organizing some night hikes. And I said, well, how are we going to organize a hike and not know what the weather is going to be? And then talking with you about it, I thought, well, the night sky, you cited it intentionally in a dark enough area that you'd have a really amazing view of the night sky. So let's say you hike to this short hike, and it's up for 365 days, and that one night you don't have it activated by the wind, but maybe the stars interact with it, or the shadows. Maybe there's a moon out. I mean, there's just all these elements. And I got a note today from a longtime member of our board and faculty member, and she said, "Oh, I always thought this piece would be most important to see at night, but going to see it in the daytime, I realized how the light shimmers, off of the anemometer cups and how
Right.
that is." And I love hearing from folks that they want to re-experience that, and to have it there for some time, even though it is temporary, is really special for that reason. We all have our own feelings of awe and exploration, and it just really sort of shifts the way, you're seeing the sculpture, of course, but it also, you notice what's around it more as well. It highlights.
Right. And that became apparent with a lot of the previous installations, that people would come back with stories. And first they'd kind of express disappointment that, yeah, the wind didn't blow, but we went outside. I got the family outside in the middle of the night and it was amazing. Like, we saw the moon, and then we saw this, animal, or like they have all these other stories. And, I think that's worth it right there. Maybe it's easier to put a sign out there, like, come for a hike, but the anticipation of what it could be leads to so many other things. I just pulled up this image just because that's how it started in Iceland, with taking these early versions of the windmills out into the landscape. And once again, you have that scale. And it still is, and it was an exercise in me figuring out how, as an artist, I relate to the scale of that landscape. Iceland's unique, where you don't have very many trees at all, and it's very windy and super dark in the winter. But I was trying to process that, and I had the freedom to, with the Fulbright grant, to really just kind of ruminate on the whole idea of, I'm in this landscape, it's really windy, it's really dark, and how can I engage with it, or pull something from this and create something. And this was kind of where it started, with just walking out into the landscape with these windmills I constructed with a lot of the same generators. They were bike generators with incandescent bulbs at the time. LEDs were just finally reaching the consumer market, but and sticks. But this was Vale, and once again, you have those mountains and scale. And the scale of wind is so big. This couldn't be done in on a tennis court size or whatever. It just become this kind of, I've done small installations of it, and it doesn't capture the scale of wind. It doesn't embrace what the movement of air is really doing.
Yeah. The wind needs space to understand it.
Right. This was a smaller one. It started to make sense because it was contained in the Center for Arts in Jackson, Wyoming. So the installation was part of the architecture that way. But you didn't catch that movement. The body would glow during the evenings, but you wouldn't see it pass over, or cross the courtyard there. That's from a distance in Vale, kind of from I-70, basically, looking at the East Vale hillside. And then I think, there's the video. We can talk a little bit about, I mean, you've been out there in the dark, right? Or did you?
No, I haven't yet, actually. That's why I plan events, because then I get out there, because we moved.
Right.
We moved to Denver, and so I'll get these texts from all kinds of people in the middle of the night. I just had the most amazing experience. Thank you so much. And I said,
that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And then we've had some photographers go out. It's hard, I think people try to capture it on their phone and then they kind of give up. It's you end up just wanting to be in the moment and be present, I think, and the subtlety of it around you. My son Jesse, who worked on the project, went up there recently, and he was just sharing how special it was. And I think it was a really special time with his dad too. They had that. So the social aspect of it has been really meaningful, and I think particularly highlighted during a pandemic. That
right,
people can have a really special experience. That
I think that's one of the reasons we decided to do it now instead of this spring. Was the community kind of needed something like this.
Yeah, and we've had thousands of people come through from the trail counter, and the response has just been so profound, and I think just it really means a lot to a lot of people. So thank you again for.
No, thank you. I mean, it's a pleasure to put it out there. When it sits in storage for too long, I start to feel almost like I'm being irresponsible. It should be out there. And, this was a photograph by one of the photographers you mentioned, Josh Kenyon, I think, right?
I think this looks like Samantha's brother.
Yeah.
Haas photography is what.
Yeah.
I don't know his.
His name is Josh Kenyon.
Okay, he has a different last name than her. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's he does nighttime event photography, and so he was really quite well set up for this, because a lot of people struggled a bit with shooting the work, but it's been fun to see quite a few amateur and professional photographers responding to it. I think that's a really wonderful element of an outdoor piece that I've enjoyed with when we opened the Ent Center for the Arts in 2018. We launched a new phase of the public sculpture program, and I never thought about all the photographers that would come out, some in the middle of the night to capture a blood moon and behind a sculpture, and so I really admired photographers' commitment to their craft, and they're so inspired by the work. So I think they're really grateful for it as well.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I've been photographing my work for 20, 30 years, and I still can't take a photograph like this. No, for people to then share some of these images, and when they do capture what I feel like it's like to be there, it's really special. Yeah, and even like something like this where it draws people out there, you see that Colorado Springs sunset. With Pikes Peak and everything. If anything, it got someone out there to see that. So
yeah, this is one of your photographs, folks.
Yeah, I was really fortunate that I think that was the last day we finished, and then it was just blazing, sunset after installing. It was like really fortunate.
The sky celebrating
last night. So yeah.
We, this project is part of the Spaces Between exhibition, which is a project, multiple sites that investigates notions of the horizon in the West and the sky and the landscape in particular. And that last image before that, you could really see you could see the horizon line in a way that it's sort of interesting how all these vertical poles will then help you understand the shape of the topography, but then also that split between land and sky in a really interesting way. I love when the sun hits these and they're activated by sunlight, by the wind. And you get this feeling of a plane, a moving sort of shimmering plane of light.
But it's just above your eye level, kind of. It's almost like water. I mean,
that's a great way to put it. When I look at it, because I often see it from the Ent Center for the Arts, which is, it's about a 10-minute walk from there, but we can see it up on the hill, and I'll notice when it's really kicking up there and the sun's shining that it just looks like it does. It almost looks like one of those mirages. When I was a kid, I was always so fascinated when we were driving and you see a mirage ahead, and I think, is it water or is it not? The perceptual play is really it's a thread through all your work, playing with perception. To that end, did you hear that a skyscape by James Turrell is coming to Green Mountain Falls this summer and is permanently going to be accessible as part of the Green Box Arts Festival and program there?
That's great. Wow. That
Falls is just outside of.
That's turned into a big event.
It's a big deal. The artist is picky, I think, about where he cites those. And it reminds me a lot of the way you talked about, where your studio is surrounded by forest. It's a site that has, it's on the Highway 24 coming up from Manitou Springs on the, I guess it would be the western side of the highway. So they get a little more light there, but it's definitely a very wooded area. And they had a Tomas Saraceno sculpture in the middle of the woods up there, one of the first years that was so captivating. So, and one of your projects, the silo, really made me think of that, the skyscape.
Yeah, I mean, Turrell's certainly been, one of my favorites. And I remember when he had the show at the Fine Arts Center too, and to actually be able to, casually go and spend a quiet day in that exhibit that he had, that was huge.
Yeah.
It was a big deal for me. I think there are things that he's working with that I get excited about, or, they certainly influence me. I'm working on another concept for, I guess I'm not supposed to tell too much just because of the contract right now, but it's similar to the silo piece, but it starts to dissolve your perception into the sky. Whereas the structure itself will kind of invite you into the space where, the sky above just kind of fades into where you are. And I'm kind of excited about that too. And I think a lot about Terrell. Well, there's a lot of artists. I wish I had been here a little earlier and kind of done some of these things I've already done.
Yeah, but I really think of your work and the legacy of land art in the West very much in that line. And it's interesting that, you went east to study, you went abroad, but then you came back to Colorado. And I know not all of your projects are happening here, but
right.
It's wonderful that we have a lot of them here, whether like this temporary one, but more the permanent ones as well. And I think that legacy in the West is so interesting because it's sort of like that whole idea of having space to explore and experiment and play, and it's harder to come by in more urban areas.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's definitely an undeniable distinction between the way the landscape and people relate to the landscape on the East Coast and then out West here. I mean, the sky does feel different. I feel like Iceland was closer to the Western conditions that way in terms of this expanse of sky. But, even working in Texas, which I suppose is West, but it feels like a completely different experience, but it has a very characteristic sky as well. And I think my early interest or just immersion in the landscape with my family and with my parents, whether I wanted to or not, a lot of those walks or whatever were not necessarily exactly what I wanted to be doing at that moment, but it enforced this appreciation for these really subtle conditions that change the way you feel about your surroundings or your orientation. I could show, where I'm at now. We keep bringing it up.
This is the current studio in Netherlands.
Yeah, so it's a horse barn. It's not actually that old of a horse barn, but it was once a horse barn that I converted into my working space now. But I'm surrounded by this elevated perspective that pretty much every day I wake up to these incredible sunrises, and then I get to come out into this studio and work here. And there's certain things I wanted to incorporate into my life that finally I was able to move somewhere like this. And it's like the food you eat throughout the day. I guess what you're looking at or what you're surrounded by throughout the day. I don't have to try as hard to get to a certain mental state as I did when I would stare at I-25 from Cherokee Street, Denver. Although there's certain things I really miss about that. I actually miss the kind of the hum of traffic. It's a fair trade, but there are certain qualities of the city and scale and perspective that I'm happy I had those years there to kind of ingest all that as well. So yeah, this is me in my studio working there. Obviously you can see behind me, this is more the clean space.
Yeah, I'm lucky that we visited in person before we, early on in this project. And
I know that was like the week before everything.
Was it? Oh God.
I don't know if it was the week before, but it was really, I think it was February.
I think you're right. Yeah, about a year ago.
Then the world changed.
Sure
I mean, It's pretty strange. I'm glad you made it up here before.
Me too. That was a great studio visit, and got a sense of a lot of the different elements of your practice. And you recently opened a show at Habu and
Yeah.
Amber, and that grouping of works. Are those all wood?
No, there's one steel piece kind of on the right there. And the way I've described this, Bill and Nick, his assistant, we kept talking kind of. First, I was supposed to exhibit last fall, I think, but they kept delaying, and the pieces changed. Part of what happened was just in my studio, even though I'm somewhat isolated anyway, there was this overwhelming sense that we were all a bit isolated or removed from. We still all are probably maintaining those tight, whether it's family, those tight social circles, but it's all the kind of secondary and tertiary social circles. Even like being in a cafe with a handful of people, you don't know them, you don't know their name, but you get used to that and appreciate it. And I started creating these kind of human scaled forms, almost wanting to fill my studio with that feeling of a grouping of maybe unfamiliar forms, but they're not going to replace people, but they all have these different characteristics. And it was a fun way of resolving what I was feeling with the pandemic and with our lockdowns and everything, and creating these things that would take space basically in this part of the studio here. It was kind of crammed with all these sculptures for a few months, and then Bill let me bring them to his gallery.
Are they all spaced 6 feet apart?
I know people have asked that. Briefly, I thought, yeah, that might be a good idea.
They look a little closer than that, but
it's more about how they relate to each other as forms.
That sense of the group. One thing we've talked a lot about. You can visit the gallery once we reopen with the new show. We'll be able to visit by appointment, and you can visit the downtown gallery, but the group experience, the social experience is really gone. And
the opening for this exhibit was really a pretty awkward night. I mean, I saw you briefly, you stopped by to pick up those cards, but
it was nice to see the work even at that scale. But I think, awkward is a good word. I think I was even talking about how when you walk around your neighborhood, the polite thing to do now is cross the street when somebody else is coming.
Yeah.
and before COVID would have been so rude,
right.
Trying to get away from you. And so it just, all of our sort of normal social cues are upended. And then I feel like I get ready to share something on social media once in a while. Is anybody else feeling super awkward today? I use like too many exclamation points in my email, or I talk too much on a Zoom, or I don't talk enough, or I turn on the camera for a meeting and I have to like look back at myself. And it's just this constant level of awkward. I think we'll get back to it. It'll feel easy again, I think, when we get through all this, but hopefully we'll always have that appreciation from having it all highlighted. One thing I really love about your work is how so subtly highlights what's around it, and calls your attention to elements of the landscape and the sky that you might not have noticed. And in a way, this pandemic has really done that, I think, for all of us, really elevated or illuminated how parts of our life that we took for granted, or
absolutely.
And also things that maybe we were doing that we didn't really think through, like being so busy and running around so much. And I think about
and it was unique timing in terms of, I moved up here with the family maybe the year before all this hit, but we were already kind of realizing certain behaviors we had living in the city. Like, I don't know why we would do those things, but you would. And then the pandemic hit, and we were already a little bit prepped for, we used to, stop by and get the little donuts at the cafe. Not that, we need another donut in our life, but these things that aren't worth the risk anymore, or more. And we will get back to it, but I think we're going to have a different, I think we're going to value certain things a little more. Each experience, we're going to want it to actually fulfill something more than just being a pleasant distraction.
That's a great way to put it. I hope that's true. I think so for me. I hope we can hold on to it. I hear some people saying that when we get through this, it's just going to be wild partying for a decade solid.
Yeah.
It's just going to be like the roaring 20s.
That'd be pretty fun.
Well, maybe that's another way to appreciate it all. Things you couldn't, but maybe there's a depth to it with it all, with so much loss. I think these also have the kind of element of an elegy or a monument to them, although they all have such a different personality. And I was thinking about an artist in Los Angeles that I'm going to include in this series, and his wife is a nurse, and he's going to be in the spaces between shows in gallery. I've been working to set up a studio visit like this and learn more about his work, but he's really struggling because Los Angeles has been hit so hard.
Oh yeah.
And with his wife working in as a nurse in the healthcare industry, she's right there with it. And I think it's just the level of traumatic that is hard to process, and maybe hard to just go on with life as if that's not happening, which is sort of how I felt when my father died. I thought, how does the world keep going on? But then the beauty in that as well is that, we are so fortunate to be living and to have these experiences. And I didn't want to just fold up and close off to the world when I lost my dad. I ended up, embracing it, and that was really helpful. And so,
I think it makes us, all of these kind of events makes us a little more intentional about engaging in what just happened. I don't know, when did your father die?
Oh, it was 2008. It was some time back.
Okay. I lost my father recently too. And it just, the way that continues to echo, and, I hear, I don't hear voices, but I hear the phrasing or the, certain things that would be said in a moment by my father. I think I'm more intentional. I think with COVID, especially someone like that working in the hospitals or that's been on the front line of this, I don't know if they'll ever be able to forget about this. It'll just make the way they go about the rest of their life a little more clear. Or
I think it's really on the scale of a war. Obviously many.
I would never want to take away what a soldier goes through, but I have heard a lot of people compare it to warfare or living through a war, and maybe I hope this is the closest I ever get to.
Right. No, we all can't totally understand that experience unless you're in it, but I think the scale of loss is as these pieces in this newest grouping that are, how long are they on view at Habu?
Till February 27th.
So just a little. And then will they come back and re-inhabit your studio space behind you there?
I don't know. That's always the problem with these exhibits, because rarely do these sell or go to collectors or other owners. It's usually something I pack up and bring back, which it's still very much worth it. It's like any work of art. I'm putting it out there. I want people to see it. But I have to store them. So a lot of times as I'm making them, I'm thinking, well, that one I would keep in our house or something. The one that's kind of in the center here, we were talking about some of the people we've lost, but here it's this one I was working on right around the time when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And it's not necessarily a monument or an elegy or anything to her, but I always associate this with RBG, and I think that's when I also started thinking about these pieces as figures. And I don't usually work that way, but it's been a unique year where I think some of those things are a little more enhanced And maybe that's how some of my work will change from here on out, where those considerations of the figure or the individual may be more present.
Well, thank you so much for sharing
Of
so much
course.
of the process. It was really exciting to go through all these different scales of process and to get to see your workspace there. And your cat's been so wonderful to watch through all this as well.
Yeah, she's been good. You want to say hi, Jade? You know, cats. They
She's a
just,
cat. It's not gonna.
they're so much different than dogs.
Yeah.
Somehow I've always had a cat unintentionally in my life, whether living in Scotland or living in Iceland, all these different places. And it's kind of nice to have that. They're just strange beings.
They're closer to wild than dogs are.
They certainly are. Yeah.
So they've got an interesting energy. And then a very practical role in your studio of keeping the mice out of the horse barn, the former horse barn.
Terrorizing the rodents of Magnolia Road.
So keeping a balance, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this. I'm excited to put this out for our community and our on our virtual community, our students. Hearing your story and your experiences is wonderful. It's been wonderful to work with you and
You too.
to live with your work, hopefully for the next number of months, and we'll encourage folks to be coming out and experience it. And I love hearing all that feedback about how important this work is to them. So thank you again for.
Me too. Yeah, I love those conversations, and I'm looking forward to getting back down there soon. I kind of watch for when the winds are going to pick up and see if I can get the family to go down there with me. So.
Right, which, like you said, is an outing and special in itself, especially.
It is, yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.